everybody. Welcome to the Koinonia Podcast. We're back today for another conversation, and I've got two of my friends, Brent and Stephanie, and they're here, and we're going to talk about work.
Get accused. That's all I ever talk about, but glad to be here.
Yes, we're going to talk about work, and you guys both are members of the Koinonia family, and you are working in the world with people who may believe the same thing as you and people who don't. And so we want to just talk together and learn from your life as leaders in your workplace, in your business, and what are the things that you've learned about being a follower of Jesus in a place where that is not the norm. 'Cause I work here at the church.
Yeah, your colleagues might look different than ours.
They do.
Yeah.
I was listening to one guy talk about his job as a pastor, and he calls himself a professional Christian. And I thought that was hilarious. And sometimes I feel that way. So I want to start the first question I wanted to pose to both of you is, how have you learned to serve God through your work? Because for me, growing up, my dad was a pastor, and so the work that he did that connection was always really obvious for me. And I know that a lot of the people listening don't work here because we only have 12 people who work here. So they would have the similar of like, okay, I'm trying to serve God through this everyday experience in my work. So why don't we start there? And I'll let either of you jump in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before you respond to that, I forgot to ask you guys to introduce yourselves. So Stephanie, please tell us about who you are and your work experience and what that's like. Yeah.
Awesome. So my name is Stephanie Seuss, born and raised in New Hamburg area. Really involved in the agricultural world. My parents are dairy farmers, have a commodities business, and I, for the last almost 20 years, have worked in the financial industry. So have worked for a big bank. Now I work for a credit union. So that's kind of my professional background.
Cool. Can I ask you a random question?
Absolutely.
Tell me about your last name. I can never. I've so hard.
You mean tell you about Justin's last name?
Yes. Yes, please.
No, I joke. So Seuss, it's like Dr. Seuss. That's what I tell people. That's how I tell them to remember it. Yes. So I'm hoping one of my children become a doctor so I can say I'm Dr. Seuss's mom.
That's genius. I love it.
Yeah, it's Hungarian. I think technically you're supposed to say Cease, but you wouldn't get that from looking at it, so we just go with Seuss.
Cool.
Sometimes people say Zeus.
Right.
So again, I was tempted to name one of my children Mighty, so they could be Mighty Zeus.
Mighty Zeus.
But I didn't.
That's so awesome. Okay, sorry for that rabbit trail. So you were about to tell us, before I forgot to introduce you, how have you learned to serve God through your work?
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about this question leading up to today, and I mean, regardless of the work we're doing, so I have 3 kids, so there was times in my life I was on mat leave, and that was my work, and I mean, we're asked to love Jesus, right? I send my kids off most mornings by saying to them, like, remember, what's the most important thing to do today? And it's to love people like Jesus does.
Oh, cool.
So I take that into whatever workplace I'm in, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you lose it. Sometimes you can lose track of it when it's like, hey, there's this assignment or this project, or I really need to get this meeting done, or my to-do list is 20 items long. And
only 20?
I summarized that.
Headers.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think there was a season in my life where it was just all about work and at work and achieving and being driven by that, right?
Yeah.
And not that that's bad inherently, but if that's what you're serving, right? Where now I can see I'm in a different role and it's very challenging in certain ways, but it's like I'm walking through this season now with my eyes open for the work that I have to do, but also for like the real, like the kingdom work, right?
Yes.
So like as an example, there was a day I had a bunch of things I had to get done, and someone in our office had just suffered a loss of a family member. I only knew of her. I didn't even know her that well.
Okay.
She was with IT. She came to help me out, and she came into my office, and of course, like the business side of me was like, oh, fix my computer. I have work to get done. But I looked at her and I just felt the Holy Spirit be like, ask her how she is. And so we didn't actually fix my computer that day. We sat in my office for an hour and she cried and we talked. And I know you can't do that every single day because your work has to get done. But that's, I think it's important to keep our eyes open for those opportunities and trust that when you choose to listen to the whisperings of the Holy Spirit, that yes, you might lose some efficiencies or some of the time that you had to work that day,
Yes.
but then trust that he'll, when you get back to that work, he'll make it easier for you to get it done, right? It's like anything, but having that openness to say, yeah, I'm here to do a job, but like my real mission
Yes.
is loving people, right? So,
and
yeah.
I serve the kingdom too.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Brent, what about you? How do you navigate that?
Do you want me to introduce myself too?
Yes, please. Oh man, in the
I
last
have
couple
a
episodes,
very unique last name if you'd like to know.
I could call you normally how I would, which is Uncle B. Normally, I introduce people at the very beginning, and I forgot for some reason.
Did you not eat lunch today, Nick? Are you
I
are you
did.
hungry?
No, I ate lunch. I had roast beef for lunch. So, Brent, please introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Uncle Brent.
Yes.
And or known as Brent Ferguson.
Yes.
And I have the privilege, I took over the family business from my father, who started in 1990 in what I've coined as the luxury chauffeured limo experience.
Yes.
So we have a fleet of limousines, and
Not just transportation, folks.
We do not like the word transportation, and we do not have drivers.
Yes,
and
that's right.
It creates a lot of uniqueness that looks a lot like we belong in the world, but ultimately we still do the same thing. We help solve the problem of people celebrating safely, traveling all together, and creating memories.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's it could even be eliminating frustration for a corporate executive who needs to get from point A to point B, who has more than 20 things on his list, and he didn't have time for his staff who were hurting, and his schedule doesn't allow it, and we step in and have that moment that we can take care of the frustration, or it could be celebrating the most important day of their life.
Yeah, right.
And we facilitate that to make it happen. And we're kind of like, more in the end, we're like the fishing line. If you're fishing, I don't even like fishing, but I'll use the analogy. If you got the boat and the trailer, and you get to the lake, and you've got all these lures, and you figured out which lake you're gonna fish in, and if the line snaps, the experience is like, and you lose that big fish, the experience can be ruined, right? So we kind of are that same dependency.
Yes.
We just look a little bit shinier and flashier than the fishing line.
That's a cool analogy. So you have the unique privilege of serving the whole spectrum of people and people's life experience, like funerals to weddings to like bachelor parties to, other sad times you would need to be driven somewhere. How have you learned to serve God in those? What's it like serving him in those settings?
It changes what most people might think a Christian's role is to speak out or be there.
Yes.
I'm reminded of, I thought you were going to say, we serve people that you might be sitting beside you on Sunday morning.
Right.
Or they might have flown in by a private jet, and they have the initials BG and ran the largest software company in the world.
Right. Yes.
Has letters MS, and in those moments, they don't want you to talk at all. If you're actually doing that job behind the wheel, which I had the privilege of doing many years ago,
cool.
You just, I think you do your job really well is how you go about doing what you do. Your life is to be an act of worship and bring the best you can.
Yeah.
You also then, I'm reminded in those stressful moments to pray.
Right.
It's not, I don't even have to think about it. It's like, oh dear Lord, give me everything I need to be able to execute this job well. That's very rare in my role today, but Stephanie hit it on the head. How do you walk out being love?
Yeah.
Does it actually have to be patient and kind today? Really? Like, is that, do I have to include all of these things that love is? So all those things weave into a daily experience that, we'll get into, I'm sure, more about how do you keep that at top of mind. But
Yeah.
I think the other thing is recognizing, I was just hearing that what you shared is recognizing and experiencing God is really joining him what he's doing. So if that employee comes to you and they're hurting, it's being sensitive enough that you can push off the drive to do the task. And you hit it on the head, but I see it as a join God what he's doing. And we have to be aware of somebody that has a question or a hurt, or seeking something that God's probably at work in their life, and you need to tune in.
Yeah. Oh man, just operating under the assumption that God is probably at work, like that, I can see how it changes how you like are looking at others and how you experience them.
Well, God is at work, and pun intended.
Yeah.
He needs to be at work with us,
Yeah.
which would lead me to real recently, and probably came out of messaging, was just practicing his presence to remember he is at work.
Right.
Yeah.
Like he's literally working and I'm bringing him to work with me.
Yes.
And he doesn't leave that.
Yes.
And I think we've come a long way from, I started 22 years ago in the company and felt like my fight was, we can't just be a Sunday morning Christian.
Yes.
Like, come on. We are pet peeve.
Let's hear it.
All right. It is that, church is where we do the ministry.
Yeah.
Right? Biggest pet peeve. that we actually live in a sacrifice of worship in everything we do.
Yeah.
And may it be pleasing. And that's very challenging, especially in the community.
Yes.
Some people that I play hockey with think it doesn't exist when you play hockey.
Yeah, think of that.
Sorry, team. Just didn't mean to throw you out under the bus. It happens in the workplace. Happens everywhere.
Yeah.
And we have to be who we are always.
Yeah. Stephanie, I want to go back to one thing that you mentioned, because you were talking about how when you heard that your coworkers lost a loved one, and you said like you had eyes to see that they needed something, that the Spirit was at work. How do you keep yourself like aware? Like how do you go about keeping your eyes open? Because I feel like it's so easy during our day and to-do list and calendar and the computer not working. Yeah. It's so easy to just like forget. So how do you do that? Like how do you practice that?
I mean, I think part of it's also personality. So part of my new job, I did this leadership assessment thing, which was really neat. And the lady, when we debriefed my results, she's like, well, your results were really interesting. And I was like, oh, okay, lay it on me. Tell me what's wrong. But she said that I had my two top scores were equal. And one was an achiever, like wanting to get things done, wanting to execute, wanting whatever.
Yeah.
And then the other was concern for people. And she said what was unique is that you typically don't see those together, right? Because achievers will be, I'm going to achieve at all costs. I'm going to step over people. I'm not going to care.
Yes.
Where people like being really concerned about people, then you typically will drop the task.
Yes.
And so I think.
What a unique combo.
Yeah, it is. It's also a little bit like challenging sometimes.
I bet.
But so I think to your question, part of it is just how we're programmed. I believe that that's a gift God's given me to like see people and like really quickly read them. Like, are you happy today? Are you struggling today? And so for me, that's supernatural that I just am like, I can read that. But I think too, it's like, again, it comes back to what I say to my kids, like your job today when you go to school is to love people like Jesus does.
Yes.
And it was so challenging for me. Some mornings I'd be saying that to my kids and I'd drop them off and then I'd be driving back and be like, it's also my job is to love people like Jesus does today.
Ding, ding, ding.
Right? Like here I'm like, I'm a great mom teaching my kids this, but then feeling this conviction of like, am I doing that today? And so, partly I think it's personality, partly I think it's just choosing to make that a focus, right? Like whether if you start your day with quiet time with the Lord or whatnot, like, but that being something that you say to yourself, I want to remember this. And I think if we actively choose to remind ourselves of that, and we also, engage in prayer time and whatnot with the Lord to say that this is what I want to be, I think that he is just going to, throughout your day then, have those little moments where you're like, oh yeah, there's a person here, not just someone who's going to give me the answer to get this task achieved or done or whatever.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Yeah, that's so good. Do you have any thoughts on that, Brent?
I've tried some different things. Had to even set an alarm to remind myself.
Yeah.
Because you can get
Like
so
practically,
immersed.
right.
Practically
Yeah.
set an alarm and have on it, something I'm trusting God for, believing.
Yeah.
Our target, believing God for cards.
Yes. Yeah.
Having
Yeah,
a
yeah.
goal card, something even you write on it and have it in your pocket so you touch it. I've tried that. Tried sticky notes on door frames
On
in different
things.
places to remind me. Books sometimes just sitting out. Music sometimes on can be the right thing, depending if you're working alone or where you're working. All those things would matter. But symbols work well for me. If I see it, it's a great reminder of something.
Cool.
I hope this doesn't encourage people to try to figure out my passwords, but I have to change my password every so often at work. So I work for a financial institution.
Yes.
I make my password a word that because you type it so many times in the day.
Oh, that's smart.
That I make my password like a phrase or a couple words to to remind myself of something.
That's cool. I think this is an important thing just for us to remember. Because as we talk about having our eyes open to see what God's doing, we can be really spiritual when we talk about that. But this is so practical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, mine's a little unspiritual. My passwords are my goal. And then I have to keep changing. I was like, well, I don't want to change my goal. So I have to change the order of which I'm writing it. And
so funny.
It's good to have numeric in there. So you throw a numeric in and then it reminds me. But
an exclamation point.
Could be, I guess, a scripture verse and Yep.
Jeremiah 29:11, baby. Let's go.
Let's dissect that, shall we?
No, but just I think that's important. Like as much as we need to have God in our heart and our mind, He should also be like the reminders can be physical and present. Yep. Okay, I want to change gears a little bit, and Brent, I'm curious about this. As you lead Brentwood, you're leading people who are both followers of Jesus and not. And so how does it, because Brentwood's not a Christian company, right?
I've tried to get them saved and they just won't say the prayer, and Jesus hasn't talked about letting companies in. And so no, by that term, they're not.
So tell me about, how do you lead people that have a mix of...
Is that sarcastic and facetious enough?
Yeah, totally. Okay. I think so.
I could see the credit union being Christian, but no, just kidding.
Well, we can talk about that too. But how do you lead people that have because here, as I lead our, in times where I have the opportunity to lead the staff, I know we're all operating from the same core beliefs.
Yeah.
So what is it like as you lead others who some may share those same core beliefs, but some don't? How do you how have you experienced that?
The best place, I think, is we reiterate, had a team meeting this week, and we reiterate value statements and critical actions that could look like a non-Christian run business.
Sure.
And often our best value statements would come from Scripture, from Jesus himself, who said, "Here's some things," and our world's done a great job at claiming those and stealing them, maybe even to say these are ours, right? And depending, I follow Jesus, and he's got some great things to say.
Yes.
So honing into that, we won't use love or faith or hope, but we use the one value. We actually change it to everybody deserves to be celebrated. So it's easy to weave in. So I just reminded them it's the same as everybody deserves to be valued.
Right.
Yeah. And receive value is a strong conviction. I felt what I believe is we're doing business supernaturally.
Yeah.
And had a retreat, couple days I went away and came back with everybody deserves to be valued and receive value.
Yeah.
So if I can make sure that client receive value at the end of the day, then it's really easy to sleep at night. There's a lot of stresses that can come. So trying to help my staff understand, well, did they feel valued? because we're in the perception business. If they don't perceive value, and right now the challenge is prices are going up, our costs are going up, and we're saying, well, how do we deliver more value to that customer? Because they just paid more for the same service they got last month, 15, 20% more, and they're questioning, well, am I still valued here?
Right.
Do you appreciate my business? Did they smile and make that person the most important person of the day?
Right.
Is kind of how we weave in living that out. And some of those challenges are hard for some people.
Yeah.
Honesty and integrity. Integrity means something different in the world to a lot of people. What you say you'll do and how you walk that out as an employee.
Yeah.
And you have to be careful. I would say we as humans are fragile, and a lot of times easy to step on toes and to tick somebody off. What's the right? What am I looking for? Have them easily offended.
Yes. Yeah.
By saying something that might be perceived as I'm better than you, which then I would kind of overlay everything with a little bit of covert. The undercover kind of Christian is how I've run a lot of my ministry, that if they're going to accuse me of something, I want them to accuse me of being spiritual but full of faith and hope and love.
Yeah. Right.
Not rules and I'm better than you.
Yes. Yeah, I hear you.
So that kind of always weighs in, and yet there's so many things that you'd be like, well, there's a lot of rules in your company. And I'd be like, yeah, well, there's a lot of risk and a lot of things that we have to have as rules, but I don't want them to be, I don't want to be accused of being religious.
Yes.
Right. So I will take a hard stance on how do I love and be patient, and then of course you unpack that to what does that look like in a day, and it often is tied to financial strain.
Oh, interesting.
Love.
Okay, say more about that. Okay. If you're willing.
Well, if you bang a limo into something, it's easily thousands of dollars.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And then it could be a bride who's expecting that vehicle the next day.
Right.
And you can't throw that team member under the bus. We don't like to use that term in our
right, because you actually have buses.
Yeah. You don't want to throw that team member
under a different moving vehicle.
Yes. Front of the airplane. And you try and then work together to take responsibility, and you're like, a mistake happened, it's costly, and it could get even bigger costly and embarrassing, and you're trying to salvage that while showing you're important to me and I value you and we'll do what it takes. Or a vehicle breaks down and we have to literally tell the person, no, I need you to receive value. Like, what would you find is valuable? And shockingly, people come back, they're like, well, I don't know, you tell me. Like, no, we didn't promise deliver what we said we would. We take responsibility for it. You tell me what I could do to provide value for you so that I make it right.
Wow.
Well, isn't that your job? No, I actually can't.
But they expect it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for
they
sure.
They expect it, but they can't articulate it. They want you to like wow them and read their mind. And because the problem is, if they say, this is what I expect, and you deliver, well, now they can't be upset with you anymore.
Right.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
And sometimes I think when those moments happen, people are just really stuck in their frustration or their fear or their whatever it might be. And
I don't like those moments.
Yeah,
I don't like having those conversations, but I usually feel peace out of them when I'm done. Mm-hmm. Like, back to that core value for me, if they've received value and felt valued, then I can go, okay, done.
Right.
Because I can't actually deliver perfection.
Right. No.
In anything, in any business. I know. Don't tell my wife.
This is good. This is a great example, though. I mean, I remember being so frightened moving those limos because it's just terrifying. You don't want to hit anything. I never did.
Thank God. See?
I know.
We pray more often than we think.
I know. But I know that you want to communicate value both to the bride who's expecting the limo and also the person who hit the
right.
And one is maybe easier to communicate value to than the other.
And one is showing value to the other. Right. So you have to feed. I don't like to correct an employee before they're going out the door to show value to my client who's paying top dollar.
Right.
Mm-hmm. There's a time and a place.
You don't want them to show up like this.
Yeah. Hey, I just got reamed out for something, which I don't even believe in reaming out. And then I wondered, did you get the message of what I was trying to say?
Right.
Like, no, don't take my calm,
Yes.
collected, firm approach as like, oh, he's a pushover. It's okay. We'll just bang that limo again tomorrow.
Right.
You know?
No dice.
And it's difficult to walk that out
Yeah.
and be firm, be like, no, this is really important and we have a standard to meet.
Yeah.
The bar is high. You can't just hang on it. Like you can't hang over it.
Yeah.
You have to reach for the bar.
Yes.
And we have a big responsibility, and I push the team. It'd probably be the other ways to keep pushing or leading or pulling or
Yes.
whatever I'm doing
Yes.
as a leader.
Yep.
To embrace that, to deliver the highest we can.
Yeah. No, that's good. Thanks, Brent. Stephanie, what about you? How do you experience leading, and both leading and working alongside people who don't have those same like core values and convictions?
Yeah.
What's that like? Or what was that like? Because you were a TD.
I was a TD and now I'm at Kindred.
Yes.
So yes, very different worlds.
Yeah.
And it's been a neat transition because if anything, and I'm going to be totally transparent, there's part of me now that like, because Kindred is an organization that is based on faith roots, it's a lot easier to be like, hey, I love Jesus. What about you? Right?
Yes, totally. Because you know you're in shared company, right?
Yes,
Like,
yeah. And I mean, and to be totally transparent, not everyone at Kindred is necessarily a believer, right? Like,
okay, yes.
there's walking out this, like at the history, you know, they were Mennonite Savings and Credit Union, so you had to be Mennonite. And then they were like, whoa, there's people who love Jesus who aren't Mennonites, so let's maybe open that up. And so
Yes.
it's been this evolution of change to sort of say like, this is who we are. Our roots are based in 22 Mennonite guys who got together and said, let's do finances through mutual aid. But yet also realizing there's a lot of people who maybe don't believe in the Lord that still align with our values and what we're doing. And so like making a space for them too, right? But what I was saying is this transition, it makes me look back at my time at TD where like, I remember being a teller downtown Toronto and was very directly told, you can say anything, but you cannot say Merry Christmas.
Whoa.
And I was like,
Wow.
I celebrate Christmas, so I'm still going to say it. I mean,
Really?
That's
Did
me.
you?
Yeah, well, of course I did.
Happy Hanukkah too.
What? Did anything happen?
No, nothing happened.
Okay.
And most people, you know, they'd either just say Merry Christmas in return or they'd say what they celebrated. And I was like, cool, right? Like,
Yes.
everyone's welcome.
Yeah.
But it's made me sort of realize that I look back and think, oh, I probably could have been a little bit more bold with my faith at TD, right?
Huh.
I think being in a place where you felt like, well, this is my personal belief, so I'm not bringing it to work, when really you should be bringing it to work, but not being as free to say, like, if you had a coworker who was struggling, to say to them, like, hey, my faith is important to me. It's a big part of who I am. Like, can I pray for you? Right?
Yeah.
I feel more comfortable doing that where I am now because I
Yes.
know the context, but it has made me feel like, oh, I probably should have done more of that.
Yeah.
And so,
But well, thanks for sharing that, because I feel like that's a feeling that a lot of us would be able to identify with, is looking back on a moment and being like, oh, I probably could have done something a little bit more intentional there. Sorry, I know it cut you off, but I wanted to just just mark that for people, is that's a normal experience.
yeah.
Like and God hasn't left you. Like he's still present, and in fact, see where he might be leading you next.
And I think he uses those times to encourage us then the next time we hear that comment, right? Whether it be at work, in our personal life, like wherever it is. I think it's like, it's sort of this fine line of, you know, if we're going to work with people who are believers and who aren't, you know, if we show up every day with our big I love Jesus sign,
Yes.
that may make an unbeliever feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And if they're uncomfortable and they see a difference in me that they want to talk about, are they going to come and talk to me about it? Or are they going to be afraid that I'm going to smack them with my I love Jesus sign to make them love Jesus?
Yeah.
So it really is this fine line. I'm not saying like hide your faith by any means, but live it out authentically.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say gently, in a way that there is that space for someone who maybe doesn't agree with you, that they still feel like, hey, she seems like a nice person.
Yeah.
And to lead with love, right? To
Yeah.
lead with love, to lead with, like you were talking about, some of those other attributes, that it's not walking around with the I love Jesus sign, but how I'm choosing to live is going to show them Jesus, even if they don't realize that that's him yet.
Yes. Yet.
Right? Yet.
Yeah.
And that's the key, is you know, It's not like I'm going to go to work and be like, tuck my Jesus card in my back pocket. And never ever pull it out. But it's making space for those who don't believe so that they're still comfortable, they're still valued, and that they're actually drawn to you or to your coworkers so that you can build a relationship with them.
Yes.
And then once you've built that relationship, right?
Yeah.
Probably we all have hard times in our lives. Probably they're going to encounter something. And that's when I would then step into like, hey, we've built this friendship. Let me tell you a little bit about my faith. Like, can I pray for you? And then hopefully that's opening those doors to them saying, yeah, I've noticed that you're a little bit different than other people. I mean, aside from my love of cows, which most people don't have, that then they want to talk to you about it, right?
Yes.
So
yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, definitely. And I think it's important to emphasize that you can live, I like how you said gently as a Christian, and you can do that and hide your faith, and you can do that and never hide your faith. Because God wants us to partner with what he's doing, with what we talked about before, right? And it's easy to think that if I'm being gentle, I'm also hiding, but that's so not true.
And it's like little things. Like, so Justin and I just bought a house and we sold our other home, and I was telling someone at work about it, and I don't know who at Kindred is a believer, who isn't, right?
Sure.
But I just said, like, yeah, we're really thankful our house sold quickly, and it was a real answer to prayer. Like, it's those types of moments where I'd speak that way to anyone, and some people might go, "Oh, answer to prayer, what are you talking about?" But I'm not gonna change my words because I don't know if they believe or not. Like, I'm gonna be in how I tell the stories of my life or how I explain the things I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use the words. I'm gonna talk about the things that are important to me. I'm gonna share like that. That's not sharing my faith. That's just me just living my faith, right? And to me, that's not me saying you need to believe in prayer. Right. That's me saying that was an answer prayer to me.
Yeah.
And so I don't change my language in that sense. That's what I mean by like the gentle piece of it. They're going to hear those things. They're going to say, oh, okay. Right.
Yes.
So I think, I just think there's no perfect answer. Yeah. And again, it's just being led by the Holy Spirit and listening to that. And yet I also truly believe when I look back at my time at TD, I didn't feel like I should or that I could share those things. And I can definitely think of a number of occasions where, like, your stomach was kind of turning and you can hear like the Holy Spirit being like, I want you to say something. Yes. And you're like, shh.
Yes.
Those are the moments I don't want to ignore anymore. Right?
Yeah.
No matter who I'm speaking to, if that's how he's prompting me, again, not to get out the Jesus stick and
he probably didn't prompt the Jesus stick. That's we've learned how to do that in hopes that John 3:16 will save the entire watching baseball community.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's harder to be you, not with the sign. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I hear echoed, I'm thinking of in John when Jesus says, I only do and say what I see the Father doing. And like, that's what you're describing, right? Because Jesus was Jesus. He didn't need a sign. We don't really need signs either.
In fact, he kind of retrenched and went places so that mass crowds weren't overloading so he could have time with people.
Yeah. Right. So true. Oh, man, that's good. Okay, I have another question for you guys that I actually didn't prepare, but I think you'll be able to speak to it. When we were talking about the to-do list, I was thinking how relatable that is. At work, we use the app To Do from Microsoft, and the little sound, like bing, when you check it off. That doesn't happen as often as I wish it would. And I'm sure that's true for many. Recently, I was listening to a speaker talk about how we spend our time. He was talking about valuable resources. And he was saying how money is a valuable resource, but it's not as valuable as time, because I can borrow money and I can share money and I can give money. But he said, all of us spend 1 hour on the hour, and I can't give it to you and I can't take it from you. And he was challenging us to spend that time in prayer where our investment will give the highest return. And I was just sitting there like, oh dear, this guy is convicting me. And when we were talking about the to-do list, I was thinking, oh man, I wonder how do you guys handle that? Because you lead a company, you work in the financial world, like stuff's got to get done. So how do how do you manage all the things? Like,
It's a great one.
yeah. Both
Yeah.
I'm thinking practically, but also through the lens of like, okay, God is with me and he is leading me in how I spend my time. So anyway, I don't know. Let's talk about that a bit. How do you handle that?
A big part for me is actually having a team around me that can keep the day-to-day tasks going so they work in their area of expertise.
Right.
And I've learned, my wife jumped in and she said, I'm not ever going to do this business with you. 2011, she jumped in, and shortly after that, I don't remember the exact day or year, but so what changed your mind? Like, you've taken over this part of the company, you've taken over this, you're doing great. And she said, well, the day I learned I could do it better than you, I realized I probably should. I should just do it.
That's so awesome.
Like,
I've never heard that story.
How did you receive that?
I think that is a really good thing. And so having team members around so I can work in my area of expertise, which would be a bit more people.
Sure.
And creativity and wonder.
Yes.
Right? I don't have tenacity on my top working genius that I
Yes.
have to finish the task.
Right.
But there's days that things are spinning like crazy and I'll have to open up my project management tool and start taking notes. My downfall is I'll take notes on like 7 things and then lose them, like today's notes disappeared.
Right. We were talking about that.
Like, I was just doing them this morning. Like, how come I can't find them? Hopefully Holy Spirit reminds you of something that's really important, but I also have learned to put key people in roles that they're really good at. And I'm really good at seeing and talking out and arranging things that I can let other people run with to make sure the day-to-days happen. So if I get interrupted by a human needing love, then usually I can carve time to do that.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I don't book my schedule so full of meetings or other things that often so that I can
right. You make space
carry
for
out.
Yeah.
And then not even in, I wouldn't say I don't need a hard concrete plan, but I live my life like that. So there's space there because a good conversation could mean like 10 new ideas.
Right.
So leave that open.
Yes.
Or it could mean somebody has a need that I just had to say 2 words and I don't know those 2 words were important, but hopefully I'm trusting that would be there. So there's tasks, and I think you got to write them down so you don't forget if you're a creative wanderer like me.
Well, what I hear you saying is you manage that by having people around you that can cover the areas where you're weak.
Sure.
And that speaks of humility.
Say it like that.
That speaks of humility. Because
knowing where you're weak is
because Stephanie, when you said, Laura, your wife, was like, I realize I can do this better than you, so I probably should. And you asked, how did that feel? How did it feel?
Humbling. Yeah. And that's probably one of the things reflecting on today. I was like, if I could go back and do it all over again, I'd probably fast forward quicker to get to what are actually my strengths.
Yes.
And God, He doesn't even need our strengths. He needs us to be humble in our weaknesses.
Yes.
Because and a strength can be a double-edged sword that it's
Totally.
You can overextend a strength.
Yeah.
But we probably we got to recognize where we don't have where we have a weakness. And I'm not a believer of go work on that weakness until you fix it. Like,
right.
Why not keep working in your strength and hire somebody to bring alongside that has their strength that matches your weakness? And
cool.
So understanding ourselves is maybe how I deal with tasks.
Yeah.
I try and avoid them because I don't actually love. Actually, I love a checked off task.
Sure.
I don't love the same tasks on the list every day.
Right.
Because that drives me crazy.
Right.
Because then I'm just doing
the same thing.
Same routine over and over again. And I like to take shortcuts and do new things. And I'll find ways to not check off the task so that I shortcutted it.
Right.
That's bad.
That's so funny. Stephanie, tell us,
where I will go and I will write something on my to-do list that I just completed so that I can check it off.
Totally.
Yeah, a little bit crazy.
I have to do that too. Otherwise, I have nothing on the list that ever gets completed. Oh, let's add that.
I did this.
My wife will look in. She'll be proud.
That's so funny.
Awesome.
How do you manage that, Stephanie?
So that's, again, I think that's I've had many people tell me, and I finally hit a place where I'll like own it and accept it, that one of, I think, the gifts the Lord's given me is the gift of administration.
Yeah.
So like
Praise God.
I can juggle a lot of balls, all the things. I mean, my kids are still alive.
Yeah. Hello.
Thank you, Jesus. Like that I haven't forgotten one of them or malnourished one of them yet in the midst of my
I haven't
life.
forgotten one of them. That's hilarious.
When they have
The administration
birthdays.
helps.
Yeah. When they have birthdays, I'm always like, happy birthday. But like, this party's more about me, guys, than you. Because I've kept you alive for this many years.
And I did all the work on this day, however many years ago.
Nick celebrates that. Often celebrates his mom for the hard work.
Yeah,
on
I
the
try to give her
birthday, so it
flowers.
works.
Like,
Yeah.
Mom,
Yeah.
this day is really
Yep,
it's about you.
absolutely.
Anyways.
But yeah, no. So I my love of tasks and lists has kind of ebbed and flowed because I have found that I can become kind of a slave to my to-do list. That like I will have a list because I think I need to have a list, and I'll put all the things on the list,
Yeah.
and then I'll look at the list and be like, I'm not doing any of the things. Like it's sort of this cycle. And I've caught myself in certain seasons of life where there's not a lot on the to-do list, and it's actually agitating to me. So I'm learning to not be like a slave to the list.
Uh-huh.
But I do think, you know, when there's all these things going on, having a list or having a place to dump those thoughts to go back to really does matter. Because without them, I think you can lose focus, right? Especially if you're trying to keep space in your life for the people, right? I will, maybe Justin won't like me saying this, but Justin is a very task-oriented person to the point that I've said to him, like, don't miss the people because you're so focused on the task.
Right.
And that's just, I mean, it's a great gift of his that he's so task focused. But sometimes I'm like, hey, like wife's over here, your
Behold.
kids are calling for you, like we're here.
Yes.
And so I think having a place to document the list, keep the thoughts, allows you to then have the time for the people and not forget that those tasks still have to be done.
Yeah.
I agree with you when you said about keeping space in your calendar, right? I've learned switching jobs, I have a lot more meetings and a lot more interactions with people versus sort of just the to-do list that I've made for myself.
Yeah.
And have learned that I need to, on a weekly basis, block out time that no one can book me so that I can sit at my desk and I can look at the to-do list and I can prioritize or I can execute. And so it's like building those margins into life so that you have that space.
Yeah.
It's a good word.
Yeah.
Margin.
Yeah. And I fully agree with like the humbling experience of just recognizing what your strength is
Yes.
and what it's not.
Yeah.
So like for us, Justin works a shift that he's home by 3:30. I typically am working till 5 or 5:30. So for most of our marriage, he makes supper.
Yes.
And I will tell you, we've been married 12 years this year, and I still have guilt over like, I'm not making supper.
Wow.
I have a bunch of friends like that were always like, when you get married, you're going to have to be able to make better food. I can bake.
Let's go.
I can bake. But it's been something that I've had to like walk out and humbly receive that like Justin makes supper and our kids are going to grow up remembering dad's good cooking.
Yeah.
Right. And for a long time, I held that like shame or guilt that I wasn't good enough as a mom or a wife because I wasn't cooking supper.
Yes.
And yet, you know, we've walked through it and had lots of conversations being like, that's just not my natural skill or talent. And I'm going to humbly, sometimes better than others, humbly accept that that's just not my thing.
Yes.
And it's Justin's, and that's okay, right?
Whoa.
So I think there needs to be that recognition of like, could I make supper? Absolutely, I could make supper, but I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm probably not going to be as good at it. I'm going to be cranky if I'm forcing myself to try to be better at something I'm not naturally good at.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a book called Now Discover Your Strengths. I don't know if you've heard of it or Strengths Finder.
I have
Strengths Finder.
I've heard of Strength Finder.
But the preface of it really is like corporate, I think it was written by an American author, but corporate America could save millions, if not billions of dollars if they focused on the strengths of their employees and putting them in roles where they could execute on those strengths versus saying, hey, you're really good at this, Nick. Here's the laundry list of what your next times are that we should work on, and let's train you and force you to do them. But if that's not your natural talent or skill, that's going to be a slow, painful process.
Right.
And it's going to cost them more money, right? So I think there's this piece of self-awareness knowing this is what I am really good at and what I'm gifted at and owning it and doing it. And then being confident enough and humble enough to say, this is what I'm not great at.
Yeah.
and either getting help, outsourcing it, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Because we all know, going back to the to-do list, you put something on the list that like you don't really want to do.
No, of course not.
Just stares at you.
That's why it's got to be on the list, or else you would have done it already.
Yeah. But I will say with that, I've learned there's an expression about eating the frog first.
Oh, I have heard this.
I think hopefully I didn't get it wrong.
No, you're right. Eat the frog. Yeah.
The thing that you don't want to do, just do it first.
Just eat it.
And I have on some days I'm like, nope, frog, you can stay on the list.
And the frog keeps going. Yeah.
And then other days I just do it. And those are the days that I honestly feel the most productive, that I get the most done. And I think it's because you're just like that ugly thing that's hanging over you. If you get it off of your plate, then everything else just sort of seems easier, or probably is actually easier, right?
Yeah.
So because we all have those things in our worlds that we don't really want to do them, or the conversation we don't want to have, or whatever. And if you just knock it off first thing, then
boom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's cool. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear recess in the background, but if you're listening,
just a little bit. I thought it was a herd of elephants.
The school
maybe.
Upstairs. Yeah, those JKSKs are heavy.
You eat it one elephant bite at a time.
Yeah, right.
You eat the elephant, right?
Right. Yes, one bite at a time. I was going to say, the way that you both highlighted humility as an element of dealing with that, I think is important. And thanks for sharing the piece about dinner, because Caitlin and I have had that conversation as well, because she is on mat leave for the second time. And I was reflecting with her, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. It's so unique, the way that mat leave creates an interruption to the rhythm of work. Because I was talking about this with Caitlin, and it's not something that I've had to experience. Like, my life has stayed very consistent since 2020 when our first son was born, and hers has changed so significantly.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you would share a bit how you've navigated that, because it's not an experience I've had, and I imagine it's got to be difficult. Like,
I did not experience it well.
Okay.
I did not navigate it well.
Okay.
So
share as much as you feel comfortable.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And actually, I share this with a lot of other moms that are on mat leave, because I was like, whoa, that kind of like knocked me out of the park, and I didn't see it coming. So
in a bad way, knock out of the park.
Yeah,
you mean?
yeah.
Okay.
So self-proclaimed firstborn type A, like categorize me, stereotype me all you want. It's probably true.
Here I am.
Here I am. And so, was really busy at work, really successful, all these things. Then I had a baby, and I was like, so what are we doing today?
Right. So, baby, what do you do?
Yeah. So would you like to be in HR, or would you like to, what are we doing today? So I always told people.
Yes. Like, let's get you working or something. I have tasks to do.
Yeah. So I always told people I literally am the worst mat leave mom. So it was really important to me, because it was just such a massive change of pace. My job was busy. It was fast. And then you have a baby, and you're like, are you done sleeping? Like, what are we going to do next?
Are you done sleeping? Totally. Yes.
So I learned really early on, I bet over my 3 mat leaves, I did not spend 10 days just at home. Every day we had a task,
Yes.
whether it was getting groceries, visiting grandma, going for, there had to be something to break up the day, or it was not good for me. And I'd settle into a rhythm, into mat leave rhythm, right?
Yes.
And then the interesting part was, after both the boys, when I went back to work, I almost quit both times.
Oh, wow.
Because I was very successful in the bank and had this big customer base, all these things. And I came back to work, and I felt like an outsider.
Whoa.
I felt like, whoa, that person's putting on new business, or they're doing that. And I was like, I can't even get into my computer.
Right.
And so it was really hard for me, because I'd come back and be like, oh, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Or I'm bad at this. I've also walked out this journey of realizing everyone else in the world could see the value I brought to the table, except for myself in the workplace. So I'm learning to sort of shift that. I mean, ultimately learning that my value has nothing to do with work.
Yes.
It has to do with being a child of God.
Yes.
But yeah, after both the boys' mat leaves, I almost quit. Like, a manager one time had to talk me off the ledge, because I said to her, well, I just can't do this anymore.
Huh.
And I think it was being out of it. So you're out of the routine and you come back and you feel like a new kid.
Yes.
And you're like, I'm never going to get back into the swing of things.
And you're being compared on a level at work to produce.
Absolutely.
And that comparison can be a thief of what you actually are skilled to do.
Yeah.
And even more so in your world, to be disrupted, to have 9 months probably felt, or a year felt like
so
many
long.
years.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also then, you're back to work. So you're trying to get back into that groove, but then you're like, whoa, I just left my kid at daycare that I just spent 12 months with.
Yes, right.
Like there's a whole lot of emotions.
It's crazy.
And so, my advice to other moms that are maybe in that season is like, you just need to be kind to yourself. I was so thankful at TD. I had a manager who said to me, like, take the time you need. If there's a day that you're like, I just need to be at home with my baby. This is the very beginning. She was like, then just do that. Right. And so it's cool. And then after Rebecca's mat leave, I actually changed jobs when I was on mat leave. So didn't go back, but started at Kindred. And it was the first time I walked in with the knowledge of what I experienced the 2 times before.
Yes.
To say, okay, Steph, like, you're not going to walk into here and be an expert on day 1. You're not going to be knocking it out of the park on day 1. And that's okay. And I have a lot of...
You're being kind to yourself.
I was being kind to myself, right? And I will say, and like, shout out to the gentleman that I report to, but he sat me down week 1 or week 2 and he just said to me, you don't have to prove your worth.
Whoa.
You're worthy. That's why we hired you. And that was so amazing to me because I came from a culture where it was like results proved my worth, right?
Yeah.
And so, just remembering you're a person. You are an employee.
Yeah.
But you are a person. And it is tough because you kind of, each mat leave was like a pause.
Yes.
And then you had to like get the ball rolling again. But I also was really challenged because there was a career counselor in one of my co-op terms that spoke to us and said, specifically around careers, they said, make your choices based off of what you want people to say about you at your funeral. And that never left me, right?
Yeah.
Because if I die tomorrow, I don't want anyone showing up saying I was a great banker.
Right.
I want to be known as a great mom, a great friend, a great wife, like all of those things.
Yes.
But there's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of like, it's an interesting season, right?
Yeah.
But again, circling back to what's my actual mission, right? Is my actual mission to be the greatest banker on the planet? No. My mission is the mission that God's given me.
Yes.
Which may involve work and may not, but it's not just work.
Yes.
But it
definitely involves you showing up at work.
Yes.
Right?
Like, should.
But I mean showing up in a, not to fulfill a job role, you showing up knowing you're created fearfully and wonderfully by God.
Yes.
So you can do
Absolutely.
that. But there's a battle happening that says you're not worthy of being here.
Yes.
Yep.
And there's a game behind the game that's, well, maybe I'm not worthy. Maybe I don't have it. Maybe.
Oh my word, yes.
and leaning into our faith to walk that out helps.
Yeah.
Just to add on to what you're seeing, I think there's a whole dynamic that you might not experience in a loving community that might be saying, hey, we're praying for you today, Nick. Like,
right. They're like, dude, if you don't get these numbers to me, like, you're donezo.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Especially there's a lot hinged on results.
Yes.
Because we're exchanging that commodity of money for the service we provide or the time. Maybe a little different in your world, but the same thing.
Similar.
And they have an expectation that comes with that. And if you don't meet it, and it all flows up, and at the end of the day, the game we play is to make our business more valuable.
Yes.
And where they measure that is first on the balance sheet and the profit and loss report. And if it doesn't show up there, the world's telling you you're not valuable.
Yeah.
And your business isn't valuable. And if you're leading a company and somebody comes to take over your company that isn't profitable, the first thing they do is get rid of all the leaders.
Right.
Because they say, well, you're obviously not doing a good job.
Right.
Because you didn't hit the numbers.
Yeah.
And when you don't want to be all about numbers, sometimes we've given money back to customers to make them feel valued. That shows on our profit and loss report.
Right.
And I could take that message that I'm not valuable.
Right.
Because I honored God with making this person feel valuable.
Yes.
And I don't serve mammon, so I'm fortunate. I don't serve money to go.
Yeah.
but I'm measured in the game of money.
Yes. How do
And
you
constantly being torn to, is my business valuable? And does it matter?
Right.
And I say my business, I actually like to change it to God's business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he has a money problem often. There's more month than there is money, we
Right.
come through that. But
Yes.
those are the tensions that are real to walk out.
Yeah. Well, I hear that really resonates with you. Do you want to speak to it at all?
Well, it's just, it's, I mean, even when you were talking about the whole being on mat leave thing, like, there's results like at work, but then there's results at home. Like it's a time, and I'm not saying that men would not experience this the same way, but I do think there's certain challenges as a woman who takes mat leave and go back to work, like that it's just, there's a lot on your shoulders. And
I can't speak to that
and,
at
and,
all. Yeah.
And it took me until my third mat leave to then say like to Justin, like, okay, I'm going back to work. We're going to scale down on the activities with the boys.
Yeah,
I'm going to need you to like be home more, like just putting those things in place. But when you talk about value, it's funny because I'm sitting here thinking you're measured by the value on your balance sheet, and at a financial institution, we're in the business of
Guess who
reading,
made me measure it that way?
Yes.
of reading the financial statements and saying, well,
you're not valuable. We're not giving you money.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's actually really
I
interesting.
don't hold that against you. That's a game.
We
It's
can
just
talk
part of the
after.
game. Yeah.
For me now, it's really cool sitting here because my role at Kindred is to lead our agriculture and commercial banking sort of, not division, but that leg of our business. Yeah. And it makes me sit here thinking like, we want to deliver value far beyond here's your loan, here's your bank account, right? And to truly partner with our members. And when I hear this, it makes me think, okay, how do I then structure our business and work with our team and to sit down and maybe if someone's balance sheet says there isn't a lot of value there, how can we still create a culture where we speak value into what they're doing or who they are versus just saying like, oh, you've got crappy equity.
Right.
See you later.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's an education there that you can serve them in a way to say, what are you doing that isn't showing up on the balance sheet? And a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah.
That I've just experienced this real recent, so it's actually very fresh. But I was like, well, why couldn't the person just ask what else is happening in your company?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, God's showing up. You go talk to these people and they'll go, you work for minimum wage and you've done it for how many years? Yeah. And why? Oh, well, we like the leaders. Like we're with them. Even through COVID was a lot of support around that. Yeah. We're praying for you. And that wouldn't be their language, but it came out during then like, hey, we believe in you. Like you've got this.
Right.
We've got a good business. We'll follow you. And those moments help build up the case of, oh, but that doesn't show on the balance sheet.
Yeah.
Right.
It will eventually, I suppose, if everybody's leaving your company. But there's bad cultures that continue to frustrate me that I'm like, tell me you don't have to be an evil person to make a whole lot of money.
Yeah, totally.
And in my world, to serve a customer and give them value, tell me I don't have to be selfish and greedy and that I can do this with is a constant battle to walk out my faith going, no. I'm hopeful for a brighter future, but I'm confident in what I have now. In if my balance sheet never matches the bank, I'm still confident, but I continue to manage it. So I'm not like the manager who just buries it and is afraid.
Right.
Because we're not called to live in fear. So there's so many layers to that.
And I think this circles back to the first question too, is like, how do you live out your faith at work, right? Yeah. And this is so interesting for me to hear this because I'm thinking, okay, how do we live out our faith at work? If we sit down to talk to people about their businesses, do we just check the boxes and look at your ratios and look at our policies? Or do we actually take the time? I'm not going to sit down and say like, let's pray about this balance sheet problem.
Right.
Maybe we will. But to then say to say exactly what you just talked about, like, tell me what else is going on in your business, right? And I mean, for me, I've always, no matter where I worked, I've always said I represent, primarily I was in agriculture. So I said I represented the farmer to the bank, not the bank to the farmer. So it's like I was their advocate. And I think we need, this is in our world, but we need to walk this out to say like, I really want to actually hear about you. Tell me more about your business. I can read the numbers. I can do whatever.
It's good.
But going beyond that, right? Because there could be so much more. Sometimes those numbers aren't telling the truth. Yeah. And do we actually take the time to value them? And in taking the time to value them is that one way that we are showing the love of Christ in our workplace, right?
Yeah.
Because
go out on
you're
a limb and
still
say
a person.
yes.
Because I wanted to lie to make the numbers better.
Of course you
Because
did.
I know the game. Or I want
Right.
to up my sales game when I go into the bank to borrow money, because all I have to do is convince you I've got it together to try and fill in the gaps, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And then I also step back and trust God that we're going to move these things in the right direction. And
Yeah.
there's been seasons of come through a real hard season, right?
Yes.
Where's the money going to come from? What are we going to do? And my my worth isn't in my role as CEO of the company.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my value isn't because I'm the CEO, and it isn't because I own my own business, or all those things, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Cool. It's fun to just watch like the conversation that we're having take shape as you're realizing, oh, this is how I can connect this.
Yeah.
And just seeing it come together is cool because this is not my world. Like, this morning I was writing a teaching session about parables and going to buy sugar cereal for youth and, getting on a call to pray with this other person. Like, it's just so different, right?
Yeah.
So it's so fun for me to see how, the message is right behind you, showing and sharing the love of Jesus on the wall. It's fun for me to see how the Spirit can be at work through you in what you're doing separately, but then also even in this moment, teaching us and shaping us is pretty cool. So I want to wrap up our conversation and want to just give you guys the space to encourage the people that are listening, whether they're business owners or employees at a company or starting their own thing or whatever. How do you want to encourage them? So I would welcome both of you to leave some encouragement.
Well, even just now when you were talking, I was thinking about how something we haven't touched on is when you're in a leadership role. Like, it's been really exciting for me to step into this because there's this amazing opportunity to encourage people, like the people that you work with, the people that might work for you or you work beside them. Like, it's just been so neat to step into this space of like, oh, cool. Like, not that you couldn't encourage, like anyone can encourage another person, but being in this leadership role, it's like, I get to seek out an opportunity to say like, Nick, like, thank you for doing this. Like, I value the work. Like, how can I help? Right. That has been, I love loving people. So that's super easy for me. But, I'm thinking there's an example just recently of a gentleman at work that has done a ton of extra things since I started. He's been like my go-to safe person to say like, hey, I have a dumb question. Can you answer it for me?
Yes.
And, he's put a lot of extra effort into it. And I was able to find a way to practically reward him for that. But then also use my words.
Yes.
Or write a note. Like, I just think, again, when we talk about how do you show up at work and love people, believers or not, like, it's through that. Our world is so quick to say, Nick, your hat's on the wrong way. Or Nick, your shoes aren't tied up, right?
Yes.
We're so quick to tell everyone what you are doing wrong or what we should do better. My encouragement would be never, ever, ever stop encouraging, right?
Yeah,
and maybe I
come
need
on.
to tell you your shoes are
Yes.
tied wrong, but I'm going to find a way to tell you one or two other things that you've done well.
Yeah.
Because we all know that feeling when someone looks at you and says, this was wrong.
Yes.
You just sort of sink, right?
Yes,
like, it
totally.
settles into your soul a little bit.
Yep.
It scratches at the you're not valuable because you were wrong. And so
yeah.
let's counter that. I think that the corporate world is full of, well, you did that well, but let's focus on your next times. And that has to happen.
Yeah.
But man, let's just like take the encouragement and put it through the roof, right?
Yeah. So good.
It's something I love. I'm so passionate about it. And I just think it's so neat when you can see someone's demeanor like physically change when you encourage them.
Yeah. You see them.
You see them. Yeah. And like, right? And
Yes.
I want to do that at work. And then hopefully, if they're not a believer, one day I get to tell them, like, you need to know Jesus because
Yes.
he does that to you all the time.
Yes. Right.
Here's a
Yes.
constant source of that.
Yes.
But yeah, I just, sometimes the corporate world feels heavy, right?
Yeah.
Struggles, what's going wrong? How can we fix this? How can we change this? And all necessary conversations. But yeah, I feel so passionately about the idea of like living out encouragement and building people up and calling out their strengths and calling out their good deeds. Like, right? So
you're saying see the people.
see the people.
That's what I hear you really saying is
totally.
that when you're walking the hall at work, see the people coming in and out of your office. And
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, such
Yeah.
a good reminder. Yeah. What about you, Brent?
Just thinking a couple thoughts. You have to keep transforming your thinking.
Yeah.
The verse be renewed, right, in your mind.
Yes.
Don't conform to the pattern of the world, which is unfortunately upgrades and experiences is how I've learned to paraphrase that.
Interesting.
Even though I deliver an experience,
Yes.
if you're constantly transforming your mind, let's go that direction, that you can recognize there's more than upgrades and experiences, which brings you back to the people.
Yes.
The other symbol I've used in training chauffeurs, trying to help them deliver an experience to the customers, just wear the sign, and I actually have it in training, a sign that I have on a lanyard, and it says, "Make me feel important."
Wow.
Right? Kind of goes to make
So
me feel
cool.
valued. Everybody's walking around with a sign that says, "Make me feel important."
So true.
And it's so easy to I misunderstand a communication, take offense even on our own.
Yeah.
Just this morning, I was communicating with a staff member, and I was getting no communication back for on that channel. And my last 5 messages, I had nothing.
Yes. Yep.
Actually, I have more than one going on right now in my world like this. And you can get frustrated and be like, "Can you just communicate?"
Yeah.
So I got in the car and I drove to meet them, and didn't tell them I was coming. And it just took a breath. I was like, "Hey," and they were working, busy away, and hadn't looked at their phone at all. And it was easy for me to go, "Are you even working?
Right.
Are
Of
you ripping
course.
me off? Are you
Yep.
absent
Totally.
and you just said you're in?"
Yep.
I get there and they're busy working. I'm like, "How's it going?" "Yeah, we're almost done. The list's almost done." And
That's
So
amazing.
really?
cool. Did you get, this wasn't on your list, but did you get a chance to check this? Nope. "Oh, do you mind if I do that?" "Yeah, go ahead." I was like, perfect. I was like, how do I get in, get out? But it's easy to misunderstand communication, where
Totally.
sometimes seeing the actual person helps in
Yeah.
this relationship for sure. And then tying it back to make them feel important as they make other people feel important.
Yeah.
And, yeah, there's ways to do it. One other thought on that I seem to come back to is I actually trained as a musician. Thought I was going to go that direction in my life. Thought maybe as a drummer doing that full time was going to be too much work. And I went into the limousine space and I was like, I'm not sure I made the right decision. But often, how do I live out being a Christian? Actually, recently has been coming back to music. I find myself in moments that I'm reaching out to expand my faith and build my hope so I can continue to love.
Yeah.
Goes back to some music that gets me redialed in, believing, speaking it out,
Yes.
declaring with my mouth
Yeah.
the good news and promises of God that keep me
Yeah.
going to do what I do every day.
Yeah.
And I have a meeting happening right now. It's huge. And I was like, put on the music. And preparing for today, I was like, put on the music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it? What
Yeah.
song do I need to pull on that helps build that faith up?
Yeah.
And which really is about worshiping God.
Yeah.
Again, right?
Mm-hmm.
We do it at work, and we get to do it at a common place we call church.
Yeah.
Even though we are the church,
Yes.
hopefully you got more people around you that are the church, and you can do more of that there. But and you have to be plugged in, right? You have to have
Yes.
people that help you do that. And I think a safe community like this really honed or fanned into flame my understanding of being a business leader, doing it supernaturally.
Yes. Right.
Because
Yeah.
we're killer sheep, right? That we have to be like sheep, but we actually have to take
Yes.
territory, and we have to declare that, and
Yeah.
and we have to do what we do really well. But on my obituary, it isn't that I was,
Right.
really good at delivering limousine service. I don't want that
Yeah.
either, right? So
Yeah.
I try and remind myself daily.
Yes.
Here's what I'm shooting for:
Yeah.
is to love
Right.
and to be patient and kind and to be able to resemble those things, so I don't have to carry a Jesus sign.
Yes.
But hopefully they see
on.
that and go, wow, he made me feel important.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know why you always cared about those things, and because they won't talk about the balance sheet and the P&L statement when you're gone.
Yes.
Like
No.
that won't be the conversation. It's not in anybody's
No.
tombstone. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing that I keep coming back to is like, yes, I have this responsibility at work, and I serve the kingdom of God.
It's a great word.
Yeah, and I know it's good. And that's what I hear through what both of you are communicating. And that's what I want to encourage with people who are watching and listening. Like, you have a job and you've got skills and you've got things God's called you to do, and he's called you to be his son and his daughter. And you get to live in that security and out of that security and be an incredible worker in the world as you show and share the love of Jesus. So
we didn't say it today, but I know other people have said, like, to consider your workplace like a mission field.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And you have authority.
Yeah.
To speak out wherever your soul treads.
Yeah.
Go do it.
Let's go. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your time.
Welcome.
Thanks for being on the
Nick.
Koinonia podcast. This was so fun.
It was good.
And I'm sure we could keep talking. And we also have got other things to do.
There is tasks on the list.
There are tasks to be done. So thanks for listening. Get some tasks done. Worship God. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.